I just got some new hand planes, so I figured that this was a good time to make a video on my sharpening process. Before I start sharpening, if you ask 100 different woodworkers how they sharpen their tools, you're going to get 100 different answers. So there's really no right way to do this. There's just the way that works for you. Speaking of that, I did this differently a year ago, and I will maybe have a different method a year from now. So it's just an ever-changing process where I'll try something new. I won't like that way, so I'll just forget about it. Or I will like it, and I'll just stick with what's working for me. I use diamond stones for my sharpening. When I first started out, I bought water stones, and I was never really able to get a good result with these water stones. And then after doing a ton of research, I discovered that you actually need to buy diamond stones in order to flatten the water stones. So these water stones wear out over time as you're sharpening your material on it, and you need to periodically flatten the water stone with a diamond stone. So I figured that since I was already buying one diamond stone, I may as well just buy 2 more to complete the set and forget about the water stones altogether. These stones are from Sharp. The first one is coarse, which is equivalent to like 300 grit. Then there's fine, which is like 600, and extra fine, which is like 1200. In the past, I always just sharpen on my bench like this. I'll just put the stones on a shop rag or something. But I've always wanted to make a sharpening stone holder like Paul Sellers has, so I'm gonna make that now. I'll just place the stones on this piece of plywood that I have here. I mark it out with a knife. I believe Paul Sellers uses a router plane to hog out most of the material here. I'm going to use my router, and this is just a plexiglass base that I made for the router just to make it easier to control. Also because it's going over a big gap over here, the small base of this router would have tipped into that little gap there. It's just plexiglass. I copied the holes from the base plate that it came with and just added these 2 dowels for handles. And I'm not going to go deep at all. I'm only going to go about 1/8. Now the stones fit perfectly into those recesses. There's 0 play, 0 slop in the stones, and they were actually kind of difficult to get out. And that's why I drilled that hole there at the drill press so that I can easily lift it out if I ever need to. I drilled the hole slightly deeper than the main recess so that I can lift up from underneath the stone. So this was super simple and easy to make, and now I want to make it even simpler for myself to set up my honing guide. I like to use a honing guide, and I know a lot of people like to go freehand. I just find this to be easy, and it keeps everything really stable. The only problem is figuring out at what angle you should set your blade. So a primary bevel on most planes and chisels is going to be 25 degrees. But how do you know where to place the blade inside this honing guide? If you place it up too high on the blade, your angle is going to be too shallow and it's not going to work. If you place it too low on the blade, the angle is going to be too steep. So how do you know where to place it? So what this honing guide came with instructions to make a stop where you take just some scrap and you nail or glue down some other scrap and you put it in a location where it's always going to be at 25 degrees. So how do we get to that 25 degrees without the instruction booklet? So it's actually pretty simple if you use one of these little angle gauges. Set it down, set it to 0, then place it on the blade. That's 22 degrees, so I'll move it a little bit until it says 25, then you can lock it down. This is actually a 40-degree blade, so that's why that looks so off. Now, instead of doing it on a separate piece of wood, I'm just going to do it directly to my actual jig here. So I'll take this that I know now is 25 degrees. I'll hold that up to where it needs to go. Actually, first I'll put on some CA glue. And I'll just lock that down with a couple of brads. Now I had some extra room up top here that I ripped away, and I'm going to use this to attach on the underside to act as a bench hook. So happy I finally decided to make this. So now let's use it. So I'm going to talk about two different sharpening processes here. One is for brand new tools, fresh out of the box, and the other is just your maintenance sharpening that you do day to day as you're working. If you do a good job initializing and sharpening your blades at the get-go, maintaining them should be really quick and easy to do. So I'm actually also going to talk about the difference between sharpening chisels and sharpening plane blades, because the process is slightly different. I'll start with the chisels. So pretend that this chisel is new, but it's not. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to make sure the back of the chisel is flat. This is super important for chisel work. When you're chiseling, you're usually using the back as a guide for paring down into the wood. So if you want your work to be straight, the tool that you're using as a reference needs to be flat and straight. But you only need to do this right when you get it, like only for the first time. After flattening the back, you never have to flatten the back again, and you're only going to touch up the bevel, unless it gets damaged, but that's another story. I just sprayed on some Automotive glass cleaner, and I'm probably going to start a whole war in the comment section down below on what people use to help push their tools along. So Paul Sellers recommends using Automotive glass cleaner, not household glass cleaner, because this has stuff in it that prevents these stones from rusting, as opposed to the household stuff, which has ammonia in it, and it also does the opposite. So this is what I'm using. Feel free to argue down below. Now back to the back of the chisel. I'll spray down all the stones. And I'll just try to get the, I already did this on this, so I know that it's flat, so I'll just go pretty quickly. So when you're looking at it, you want to make sure that it's taking off like an even amount on the back. If it's taking off more on the sides than in the middle, that's fine. Just keep going with that, just as long as there's like up a little bit, that's going to be flat. But if it's taking off more in the middle than the sides, that's probably a problem with the blade, and get a new blade. So I'll just go through the grits here. Now this is something that Paul Sellers does also. Instead of using the leather strap to strap the back of his chisels, he goes directly on the MDF. So the back of the strap is just straight MDF, where the top of it has the leather on it. And now just put on some honing compound. Now that back is nice and shiny and flat. And you never have to do that ever again unless you damage your blades. So now time to focus on the front. So from the factory, these are probably ground to 25 degrees. And when I used to get my chisels, I would spend time initially grinding it, sharpening it at that first 25, and then I would move on to the secondary 30-degree bevel. But I don't think that's really necessary. I think I'm just going to add the 30-degree bevel onto the whatever the factory ground is. So I'll put the chisel into the honing guide. Line it up at my 30-degree stop. Lock it down, and then I will just go through the grits.
This is a big table you got.
This is a big table I got. As far as pressure goes, I'm not putting a lot of pressure on this at all. Just like holding it very lightly so that it doesn't tip over. I'm not like pressing down really hard. I'm just lightly holding it. And then I'll go to the next one. So I can feel that there is a burr on the back side now, even across everything. And it really doesn't take any time at all, and that's because of the secondary bevel. So the point of the secondary bevel is to make sharpening quick and easy. All you have to do is remove a tiny little bit of material right at the tip of the chisel, and it really doesn't take any time at all just to remove that little material. That's really the purpose of the secondary bevel. Now to get rid of that burr, I'll just take it over to the finest grit that I had, and I'll just, for 2 seconds, just get rid of it. That's it. Now I'll take it over to the strop. Now for the bevel, I'm not going to use the MDF side, I'll use the leather side. And I'm not going to use a honing guide here at all. I'll just do this like 20, 30 times. Just once on the back side in case there's a burr. Nice and shiny. Let's test it out. So I'm not sure if it's coming off on the camera here, but you could see how smooth and shiny those cuts were compared to the rest of this wood. It's hard to tell, but you could definitely feel the difference. This feels super smooth. Wouldn't need to even sand that. And that's because the back of the chisel was super smooth. So the sharper and smoother your tools are, the smoother your cuts will be. So what I just showed you is what I would do with a brand new chisel. This is what I would do for just basic maintenance. All right, basic maintenance, I'm only going to go to that 30-degree bevel. And I'm only going to use my extra fine stone. That's it. Now I'll strop. All right, I could do that forever. The only time that I'll ever go back and regrind that primary 25-degree bevel is when the secondary bevel gets too big. So if you keep grinding on the secondary bevel, it's eventually going to get taller and taller and taller and creep up the blade. And the whole point of the secondary bevel is to make sharpening quick and easy. But once you have to remove more and more material, it's no longer easy and it's no longer quick. So then I'll go back and I'll regrind to the 25 degrees and then add that small secondary 30 degrees, and I will not touch the back. Remember, because that's flat, we know it's flat, we just don't touch it. I just got the blade sharp and shiny and I want to keep it that way, so I'm going to put on some 3-in-1 multi-purpose oil to protect it from any sort of corrosion. As you can see with this plain blade, I did not put anything on it to protect it, and rust is starting to form. These little bottles have an easy to use drip spout, so the application process isn't messy at all. I just put on a few drops and then wipe away the excess. Now I can just store it away and I don't have to worry about it corroding in my humid shop. So it really is just the best when a brand that you already use and already love approaches you for a sponsorship, because I can honestly say that I use this and I love this stuff. So if you want any more information, I'll drop some info down below in the description. Thank you so much to 3-in-1 for sponsoring this video. Now I'm going to talk about sharpening plane blades, which is slightly different than chisels. Just like the chisel, the back needs to be flat, but unlike the chisel, the whole back does not need to be flat. So to save time and effort, I only flatten a small portion right by the edge. To do this, I use a metal ruler and I put that on the stone, and that lifts up the plane blade slightly. I did not come up with this. This is like a method that a ton of people use. The back is never used as a cutting reference like the chisel is, because this is being held in place by the plane. So this just saves time and effort. Now this is when it's brand new, this is what I do. I don't do this when I'm just maintaining. This is fresh out of the box. Put it up right to the edge and go. And then move on to the next one. So if I had to flatten an entire back, that would have taken a ton of time. There's absolutely no reason to have to flatten the entire back of a plane blade. And I do the same thing. I put the strop on the MDF side and then focus on the front. Again, the 25-degree bevel doesn't matter at all. All I want is the 30-degree secondary bevel, because it's going to be easier to sharpen and flatten and shine up a smaller amount of material. Now here's where plane blades are also just a little bit different. After you have a primary bevel that's completely straight across, I actually put a slight camber on the secondary bevel, so it's slightly curved. So if you've ever planed and noticed lines in your wood, those are called plane tracks, and that comes from the corners of the blade digging into the wood. So if you put a slight roundedness onto the secondary bevel here, then it'll hopefully get rid of those plane tracks because the corner is not digging into the wood. So to do this, I'll first do some additional strokes on the coarse. Then I'll also only go straight on the fine. So on the extra fine is where I'll do the slight camber. So the point of these honing guides is to actually hold your blade straight and square. But what I want to do here is actually rock my blade a little bit so that I'm creating kind of a curve on that really small micro bevel that's there. So I'm going to do like 10 strokes where I'm like leaning towards the right, and then I'll do like 10 strokes where I'm leaning towards the left. So like you couldn't even see what I was doing there, but I was leaning on one edge or the other. And then I'll kind of like just like roll it. Now I'm leaning from right to left. Now I'm leaning from left to right, right to left, left to right. So now I have to take out that burr. Take off that burr. So actually, I don't know if you saw that, but the reason why I made these low, these are like a 1/4 inch, is so that I can pull off the burr easily on the side of the planes and the blades. If I had these up higher, like if these were 3/4 inch, they would get in the way and I would have to do it like awkwardly. So that's actually the reason why I made these short, so that I can place the blade on its side here and then deburr it. Now I'll take this over to the strop. Test it out. Okay, so now I just got this blade sharp. I don't want to mess it up. So I'll put this on like that, slide it forward. That way I don't mess up the edge. And I like to get it really, really, really close to the edge there. I'll tighten that down. I'll do this one-handed so you guys can get a good view here. So that's a nice shaving, but I think I could go a little bit thinner. Let's get thinner than that. Let's see how far we can go. So these are super, super thin shavings. Not sure if this is coming across on camera here, but the finish, the cut quality on here is super silky smooth. Can you see that light reflecting off of there? There would be no need to sand this after planing. Awesome. Here's a piece of walnut that was cut on the bandsaw. So there's a bunch of bandsaw lines. Let's see how smooth I could get it. So I'm actually getting slight tear out where the grain is changing over here. So I think I need to close up the gap here. I'm gonna do that 1 second. So what I'm doing here is I'm adjusting the frog so that it's getting closer over here to close up this gap over here to avoid tear out. Because if there's something supporting the wood fibers on this end, then it's less likely to tear out. And before I go back, I forgot, I like to add a little bit of oil, the 3-in-1 oil, to these moving parts here, just to make it easier to make these adjustments, the lateral adjustments. All right, let's see if that's better. So here's that little bit of tear out from the grain changing direction. Let's see if we could get rid of it. Am I going the wrong way here? Yeah. Oops. That totally worked. So you see the light reflecting on it, and there is no more tear out in that area. If anything, just slight that I would be able to clean up with a card scraper. Awesome. That whole process with the steel rule just to get a small area on the back nice and flat, and then going through the grits and putting a camber on at the highest grit is only something that I do when I take a tool out of its box. It's just for brand new tools, and it's not something that I do all the time. Just to maintain the sharpness on a daily basis, all that I do is the extra fine and a strop. I do not go to my coarser grits, and I definitely do not touch the back at all. That's just flat after initializing the blade, and I do not touch that again. I don't want to spend time sharpening while I'm building. I want to actually be building. So I just maintain the sharpness that I got from when I initially took the tool out of the box. Speaking of taking tools out of their boxes, I just got a low angle block plane, which is supposed to be great for planing end grain. and a number 62 low angle jack plane. So I also picked up a 40-degree blade for this, and this is supposed to be great for avoiding tear out in highly figured woods. Really excited to test all of that out. And that's really the takeaway of this video, is testing things out. These new planes are bevel up planes, and I've only been used to bevel down planes. From what I've read, to make the camber effective on the bevel up planes, I'm going to have to make it more drastic, like more of a curve than what's required on a bevel down plane. So that's all going to be an experiment for me to figure out how I'm supposed to set up these planes in order to yield the best results. And there's really, I guess, no right way. There's a way that's going to end up working for me in that specific time. And just like there's a way that's going to work for you as well. I personally do not like to sharpen. I really don't enjoy the whole process. I want to be woodworking. So I set myself up for a situation where I have to sharpen the least amount of time as possible. But if you're somebody who likes to sharpen all day long, go ahead, that's great for you. So whatever is the most fun for you that gets the results that you're looking for, that's what you should do. Thank you so much to 3-in-1 and WOODCRAFT for sponsoring this video. I am so happy with my new toys. I can't wait to share these with you guys the more that I use them. And I am super excited that I finally built this little jig. Really happy that I finally did that. But now all I need to do is build some sort of shelf in my workbench so that I could quickly just throw it up onto my table over here. So I hope this was helpful for somebody. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. You want me to make dinner right now?
Yes.
What time is it? I'll make dinner in 15 minutes, okay?
What?
I'll make dinner in 15 minutes.
15 minutes?
Yeah.